everyone, and welcome to May's Author Nook. My name is Jordan H. Bartlett, and I am the author of Contest of Queens, Queen's Catacombs, and Queendom Come. And I am here today with a childhood hero of mine, author Kim Wilkins. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing so well. So I'm so excited to chat books with you, Kim. Kim has written over 30 novels across multiple genres, academics, fiction and nonfiction, and is also a professor of writing and publishing at the University of Queensland. I first read her series, the Gina Champion series, as a teen, and it is such an honor to sit with you today, Kim.
Well, thanks.
So the theme of today's episode is Sculpting, a Spooky Series. And while we'll be focusing a lot on the Gina Champion series, because that one's close to my heart, feel free to draw from the rest of your bibliography.
Thanks.
So before we get started, please tell me a little bit about yourself and your works.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. And well, thank you for reading my books, obviously. So I published my first novel when I was in my 20s, back in 1997. So it's coming up on 30 years in the industry. And these are, for the people who have actually got the video on, these are all my books behind me because they're bunched in a bunch of different translations and editions and stuff like that. So um, uh, I started writing, I always wrote. I can't remember a time when I didn't want to tell stories. Like for me, reading a story and writing a story were the same pleasure. One of them's just a little bit harder than the other one, and takes a bit longer. So you get a longer period of immersion, as you would know if you've written a whole series. You're immersed in it for a really long time. I've always been able to get published, for which I'm very grateful for. I've had a couple of bestsellers in a couple of weird places. I've had plenty of books that only sold modestly. That's why I also have another career as an academic in a big university. But I get to think about and research stuff on publishing and writing, and read books for a living and write books for a living. So you color me a happy camper.
It really sounds like the best of all the worlds combined. And you
Mm.
probably get so much inspiration. If you're teaching writing, you're also then getting those creative juices flowing in your day job for your nights out as an author.
My nights out as an author. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. I actually do often write at night. I get into this is my work office. I've got a lovely office at home that's got fairy lights, and sometimes I just sit in the corner and write on my laptop in the evenings, and it is like going somewhere, like my night outings. Yeah, I mean, they're two great, very complementary careers, especially because, yeah, like I'm not a professor of engineering, I'm a professor of writing. And, I get to meet lots of wonderful people who are writing wonderful stories themselves. And, I never get sick of hearing about people's stories. And, I feel such enthusiasm for other people's stories. I haven't been in the classroom much in the last couple of years. I've been around here so long that I have a senior leadership position now instead, but I even get to use my creativity there. So there's nothing wasted when you choose a creative life.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah. And you never know what's going to feed into your works too. Like even just some overheard conversation in the teacher's lounge maybe sparks an idea.
Yeah, always.
Always. So I'd love to chat with you. I'm going to pull my very well-loved beaten copy of Bloodlace, Gina Champion. It was an ex-library book because I was saying before we started filming that I had to hunt for these books in New Zealand. They weren't really, I think they were published mostly in Australia. If you ever find a copy of these books, they are just gems. Hunt them down yourself and you'll find out. So Gina Champion is a teenage psychic, and she can glean information about people in an item's past by touching it. I found that such a cool premise because it lent itself to so much complexity just by touching a button or a paperclip. What was your inspiration for this character, and what was your inspiration for her powers?
That is such a great question. And there's two different things. Let's do the second one first. I went through a period, you know, in the 90s, I guess, before I started writing that book, where I was very fond of going to see psychics. And I saw a psychic who billed himself as an expert in psychometry. which I'd never heard of. And he just sat there. He said, "So give me your watch. You wear it every day. It's absorbed you." And he just sat there and gave me the most accurate reading I'd ever had in my life. I still don't know whether I believe it or not, let's be clear, but I thought, oh my God, the opportunities for this, if I wanted to write about something that just tapped into history. I mean, imagine that. Imagine if you could walk into the British Museum and kind of like sneakily touch something and just feel, get a picture or a story in your head of of how it was made or of something that it witnessed or saw. I just think, I thought that the possibilities for fiction were just endless. In terms of what my inspiration was for Gina herself, it was when I was growing up, I used to love Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden and girl mystery books. And my earliest reading memories are of sort of sitting there reading these books that often had a bit of a supernatural or at least a mystery element. And I've read a whole bunch of different ones. I guess Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden are the most famous ones, but they were always redheads. They were always plucky redheads, and so it was kind of an homage to that, the idea of the sort of the headstrong, you know, redhead girl. Yes, and then she has this psychic gift. So when she goes to investigate, she gets the right object in the at the right time. She can actually unravel the story behind the story.
I love that. And it's so beautiful because I know what really drew me to her and her powers and her stories was that it was set in a very small town. And so often I also grew up in a small town and you sometimes don't think it's even on the map. Like nothing big happens in the small town suburb life. And also as a teenage girl, you feel I mean, so many things are changing, so many things feel off, so many things are against you feeling like you belong. And so, what was beautiful with Gina is the thing that made her stick out, the thing that made her different, this power, was something that gave her such power in her own life, such agency. Like she could use that thing that made her different, that maybe made her feel like she didn't belong, to support her community, to help her community. And especially in the first book, I just love that she's able to give a voiceless woman a voice in the end, which, I
Yeah.
mean, as a teenage girl, you never feel like anyone wants to listen to you. So it's just this beautiful pile of empowerment in one book.
Oh, thank you. Well, it won't surprise you to know that I grew up in a small seaside town, very much like the town. In fact, it was basically based on where I grew up. Obviously, the names have all changed, but I used to ride my bike around the shore front all of the time and think about this book. And so, all throughout my 20s and trying to turn that feeling of what it was like to live there into something that was, instead of being like a harrowing memory of my childhood, kind of turn it into a setting for a series of mysteries. Make it much more interesting than it actually is. The town itself has really changed. Obviously, it's because it's on the seaside, it's been gentrified,
Mm,
population's gone through the roof, and it's not sort of recognizable as the place I grew up anymore. But I still will never go back to live there.
yeah. Well, and it makes sense that it is actually a place that you based on a real life like town because
Mm.
it's so vivid. Like when you're reading
Oh,
about
thank
Blackwater
you.
Bay, you're just like, I'm a townsfolk member now. I basically live here. I know what street I have to turn left on to get to the cemetery or the street I have to turn on to get to the library. Like
And
it's almost like its own character.
Well, I'm so pleased to hear you say that. And again, before I wrote these books, I'd spent a great deal of time writing books set in very different locations and different historical periods as well. So, I knew 17th century London and I knew, Berlin. But it was writing about somewhere where I didn't have to go on Google Maps when it came out, actually. I don't even think Google Maps was out then, but or I didn't have to consult a map or a book to figure out, yeah, where to turn left. It was so relaxing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like especially if you're spending hours and hours biking along the seafront, it's probably in your bones how to get from A to B.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the first book is set in Blackwater. Actually, the whole series is set in Blackwater Bay, but
Mhm.
the main plot centers around a theater that is a very historic place and then has a lot of history in the bones of the place. Was that set on a real life theater, or did you put that in your Blackwater
It
Bay?
was it was based on a real life theatre, but that had been running for years and years and years and years. But yeah, I elevated it a bit for the story, made it a little bit more colourful and dramatic and so on. But yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, with pop-up ghosts every once in a while to just keep us
yeah,
on our toes.
that's right. As I said, more interesting than the
Yes,
actual
yeah.
no pop-up ghosts in the theatre there. But yeah,
Yeah.
I was in a an amateur musical version of Calamity Jane in that theater. And I still remember that the great thing about theaters is they're like rabbit warrens, and there's holes where magical things can happen, and like pulleys can go through and curtains go up and the wings and the yeah, so really, really rich place to set a mystery because there's lots of places where things can hide.
Hmm. Yeah, and I loved too, you really feel the frustration of Gina who wants to explore all those nooks and crannies, but she has to be on stage left and being called by this person and someone else is following her and you're just like, she needs a night alone in this
Yeah,
place
yeah.
to really get
But she's
to the
only
heart of it.
15. Yeah.
Yes, she's only 15. She really can't show up unannounced to the
Yeah.
theater.
Yeah. Mm.
And so in the series itself, each book does center on a different main mystery, but Gina's
Mm.
coming of age story really spans the whole 5 books. How do you plan out the multiple layers of growth and development of plot, character, and relationships across such a large span?
Yes, especially when you've got a 3 book contract and then you get another contract for 2 books and you haven't thought about that. I guess in a way, what I did was I think over the course of the books, Gina turns from being a 15-year-old to a 16-year-old. And so I just kind of let her grow up. And I kind of thought about the sort of regular things that I would have gone through at that age, given that the books are, I think I wrote them between about 1998 and 2003, something like that. So they're really sort of turn of the century. So things were quite different for teenagers then. Um, so I guess she's a millennial. Never thought of that.
Yeah,
It's millennial fiction.
Millennial Gina. That's probably why I loved her so much. I was like, oh, like recognizing like.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't keep everything in my head, and there's, probably if anybody started at the beginning and read till the end, they'd go, "Whatever happened to that dog?" Or that kind of thing. But if you've got the basic, I really felt her character. I really knew her character because I guess, like all good characters, they're a version of yourself. They're not yourself. They're like a facet of yourself that you've polished up to put in a story. So it was easy to access her again. And I guess also because it's kind of episodic, you see what happens in the story and if that can sort of speak to some kind of transition in her life or something like that. So I guess that's how I went about it. Mm.
Amazing. Yeah, and then just that experience of being a teenage girl, having to navigate those friendships and the family, and then she had that awful her the teen love of her life passed far too soon, and all of those different things give her little ways to grow, I imagine. Um,
Mm.
but then you get a bit of freedom because if the each book is a its own plot.
Yeah, it's that story. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's kind of each one is very self-contained, which is lovely because you feel very accomplished once you've finished it.
Yes. Yeah. You don't need to have read the first one to read the fifth one, for
Yeah.
instance. Probably even read them out of order. But yeah, once you set up the character, I mean, I guess we all have a sense of how people will behave in certain situations given their background. And yeah, as you
Mhm.
say, it's kind of heartbreak in her background, the fact that she's the youngest of a family and the parents basically ignore her. She's just basically on her own. She's gold for writing fiction, right? Parents
Yes.
solve problems. I know I'm a parent, right? If anything, if my kids like were was suffering from any of the things that Gina has to deal with, I'd expect them to tell me and I'd go in and solve it. So, you just get the parents as much out of the picture as you can and give them some freedom. And
Mm.
yeah, and I'm not a millennial myself, I'm a Gen X, but I had a very free upbringing in that small town that Blackwater Bay is based on, where it really was, you'd get home from school and then you'd just wander off and, you let yourself in, your
Mhm.
parents went home, and then you just wander off with your friends until everyone's mum would stand out on the front step of their house and call for them. I mean, I realize I sound 100 when I say that, but I can't believe the change that I've seen in my life from when I was 12, say, to what a 12-year-old has to deal with now. I mean, in
Yeah.
some ways, it's brilliant. They've got all the information in the world at their fingertips. But in other ways, it's awful because they've got all the information at the world at their fingertips.
Well, exactly. And I was saying before we started recording, what I loved reading this book is it really, I mean, nowadays, if you've got a mystery, you type into Google, this is what I want to know, and it comes with a nice little AI generated summary, and you're set to win, but you also forget that information 20 minutes later because you've gone on to another Google search. What I loved about this is that she had to go to the library and delve through the newspaper articles from, 50 plus years ago. She had to get out a book, but it wasn't in that library, and it had to take a week to get in. She was having a conversation with the librarian assistant, and she said, "Oh, I think my dad might know. Go have an interview with him down at the old folks' home, and he might give you more information." And so there were just all these really lovely ways that she picked up pieces to the mystery that you felt so rewarded every time she got a little nugget of, oh, good thing she asked that person at that right time, which I just don't think
Yeah.
you could do nowadays.
Well, no, and I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that sort of sense of satisfaction. I again back in the 90s, one of my first jobs was as a research assistant for an academic here who's since passed. And he was early modern literature, so Shakespeare, Beaumont Fletcher, that kind of thing. And he would get me to go and find things for him. And the only way you could find the particular thing was you had to go to the library catalogue to find the book that had the list of the microfilms. And then you had to write down the numbers of the microfilms. And then you had to cross-check them with a big spreadsheet that had them all, because they had standard numbers as well as these particular numbers. And then you had to go and order the microfilm. And sometimes they were off-site because nobody had looked at them for 100 years or whatever. And you'd have to wait for them to bring it back, and you would get a letter saying that the microfilms were now available for you to look at. And then you'd go in and you'd look in the microfilms. And I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world that you could actually press print and get like a photocopy page of what you were looking at on the microfilm. And then I'd package it all up and take it back to the professor. And it was the funnest job I ever did. And if I wanted to do that now, I would just go clickety, clickety, click on my laptop and boop, there it would be. And that's very convenient, but it's nowhere near as fun.
No.
It was like being a literary detective. It was so great.
Yeah. No, you're
Mm.
so right. There's just so much joy in even, you're trying to look something up and you go into the index of a book and you see the keyword that you're looking for and it's like, aha, there it is. Like flick,
Yeah.
flick, 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 flick. Yeah, oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, I mean, I'm not a Luddite. I don't have anything against technology. I think it's been great in so many ways.
mhm.
But I'm not sure if it's in one of the books that you've read, but at one point, Gina's parents offer her a mobile phone and she says, no, thank you. I don't want a tracking device on
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but and my kids don't mind if I track them. They share their location with me all the time. I don't know. I would never have done that in a million years.
It's crazy how things change.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but it's so lovely to see the way things get worked out without all of the conveniences we have. And I suppose if you were to write a modern day, oh, sorry, obviously Gina is still modern, but like today's world,
Yeah.
Gina,
20 year later. Yeah.
you'd,
25 years later.
yeah, you'd
Mm.
have to do some real gymnastics to make it so that she still has to find things out slowly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe the Wi-Fi is always down on the.
exactly. Yeah, Wi-Fi's down. She's camping and there's no cell service.
Yeah, they're always camping.
Yes, always camping. That's the solution. And all the mysteries are in the woods. That's what
Oh,
happens.
yeah.
And so writing a YA series with elements of supernatural horror must feel like walking a bit of a tightrope between scary and no, that's too scary. How
Mhm.
do you find that balance, and what advice would you give to aspiring writers hoping to craft a spooky YA novel or series?
Yeah, that's like such a great question. So my first book, which was not a YA novel, was had some really, really graphic and violent horror in it. Little bit in the second book, and a little bit in the third and fourth. They're all my adult novels, and I was writing the Gina Champion series along at the same time. And I didn't want to patronize the audience because, I presume that they'd seen some things, but I'll also note that at the time the advice was, and I think it's probably still the case, that children read aspirationally. So if the main character is 15 or 16, it's probably a 12 or 13-year-old who might actually be reading it. So I guess I just, in terms of the sort of horror elements, I tried to keep them sort of more atmospheric and spooky than sort of shock horror.
Mhm.
There's that fabulous distinction that Anne Radcliffe made when she was writing her Gothic novels in the 1790s about the difference between terror and horror. Horror being this thing that's kind of like in your face and sort of abject and, inescapable, whereas terror is this kind of like thrill of the senses. And so I just kind of leaned a bit more into that. And the interesting thing is I found that so I really, really liked that. I really, really liked creating atmosphere far more than I liked, describing eyeballs being pulled out or whatever. And especially after I had my kids and I couldn't handle anything awful at all. So I really leaned into that sort of like development of atmosphere. So think about place, think about what's hidden, what you can see, what you can't see. If I'm teaching writing, I always say it to my students like this: what's scarier, the moment when you walk into the bedroom and see a giant spider on the wall, or the moment you walk back into the bedroom once you've got the fly spray and you can't see the spider?
Gone.
And
Yes.
what you want to go for is that second one where it's like, I know that there's danger here, but I don't know where it is. Because that brings people's senses alive, even if they're reading, and it just really engages them in the book. And I think, when I first started writing, I wanted to be Stephen King, but even Stephen King's not Stephen King anymore. He's absolutely leaned into that sort of psychological terror and stuff like that. But what I found was that I just got really good really quick at just creating an atmosphere. So even
Mm.
if nothing is happening, you get a sense that there's possibility in the space that you're describing. There's possibility that there might be that rustle, in the leaves might be something. So that's what I would say. Just focus on developing the atmosphere. And the way to do that, of course, is to, create a space of possibility. So work on setting, but then feed it through the characters' senses, all of their senses, not just their sense of sight, which, usually if you see something, unless it's like a giant spider, you're not as afraid of it. It's when you hear something
Mm.
or when you can sense something on your skin, like, that there's a change in temperature or whatever. So yeah, focusing on those kind of like making the place a place of possibility and then sort of feeding that through the characters' senses. And then, of course, have a plot element that's interesting, like they hear a noise or they're not where they're supposed to be. They're somewhere where they're not meant to be, and they have to
Mm.
listen out for someone coming back. or they're somewhere completely new and they can't see where they're going or whatever. So you bring those sort of three things together and you can create a really crackling atmosphere. It just makes your reader go and not look up.
Like palm sweaty. The
Yeah.
plastic on the edges of all of mine are just curled back from,
Oh,
yeah.
that's beautiful. I love that. I
And I
love
will
that.
say too, thinking about what you've said, and I'd have to double check the rest of the series, but I know definitely in Bloodlace and Fireheart, a lot of what happens doesn't happen to Gina, but we're seeing it through her point of view. So in Bloodlace, it's the leading ladies who keep seeing the ghostly hands, the pools of blood. And so she's getting almost like secondhand terror
Yeah.
of I can't see what you're being terrified by, and I should because it's my world. And then
Yeah.
Fireheart, it's the boy's dreams with the and he's being affected in a way that she can't touch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's such a good point. You have to pull the whole, like all the senses in to create that atmosphere. Mhm.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's such a, I think everybody knows, right from the senses, but really, really, really right from the senses, right? One of the things I love to do when I teach creative writing on this is I read everybody a big section of Lord of the Rings when they're in the Mines of Moria. It's completely black. They do not have the sense of sight for
Oh.
pages and pages and pages and pages. And so there's all this stuff around sound and the temperature of the air and all of that kind of stuff. And it just brings you alive. And the other thing I would say is like, I mean, we all know there are five main senses, but there are other ones that we can there's other ones that you can tap into, like proprioception, which is knowing where you are in space, being
Mm.
able to orient yourself in space, or a temporal sense, a sense of time passing. And if you're in some kind of weird environment, you can imagine how just disorienting someone, like they're not sure if they're up or down or whatever,
Mm.
disorienting someone in that, it feels like, has it been seconds or hours? Or you can see those things are also really good at creating that sort of sense of unsettledness that you want in a good scary book.
Yeah. Yeah, and feeling someone brush up against you, but knowing that there's no one there.
Oh yeah, that's the
Yeah.
classic, right? Or
Oh,
even just that sort of you actually can't feel it, but imagine you can feel it, And I think that's it. The imagination is such a sensitive tool,
yes.
and that's what you want to do as a writer is you want to just connect your imagination to the reader's imagination, through the magic of black marks on a white page. It's
Yeah.
crazy. The magic spells. Books are magic spells.
Oh, 100%. Books
Mhm.
are completely magic spells. You can live in another person's skin for a while.
Mhm.
Yeah. Have memories
Yeah.
you never created yourself. Yeah.
And never ever have a memory of having looked at black marks on a white page.
Yes. Actually, that's so true. Yeah.
That's
It's like
the
you
thing.
see
I mean,
through.
yeah, it's like you
Mhm.
see through it all together. Like I just finished last night reading a book that I read as a teenager. I've got a group of friends and we're all writers and we have a reading group, which is where we reread a book that was influential
Amazing.
on us as writers.
Yeah.
And so we've just reread Alan Garner's The Owl Service. Um,
Oh my gosh, I love that book. Yes.
I know,
Yeah.
right? So I've just reread that and it's so different from like modern fiction.
Hmm.
He doesn't explain anything. They all talk weird. They
Yes.
talk like
Yeah.
in the 60s, I guess. But the atmosphere of that book from start to finish is just it's peak. And he doesn't go into long descriptions. He just knows what to describe at the right time.
Hmm.
It's just a masterclass in judicious description. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't think I've read that book since I was maybe 10 or 11, and I can still vividly see the feathers peeling off the teacups. Like
Yes.
just yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
So good.
It's
You should reread it and then let me know if you enjoyed it as much.
I will, yeah. And it is interesting too, the what changes as you age in how you interpret, how you interact with a book. Like
Yeah.
so many different things are picked up. That's where it's great. There's such a community around, reading lots of books per year. But I
Yeah.
feel like we need to also be rereading because you can't just read one book and never touch it again. Like you miss out on so much.
This is the thing, right? And this is why we started this book club because, as I said, we're all writers. And so these books had been important for us in some way. We kind of understood that they were.
Hmm.
Um, but to read it again, like to read that one again. So the book that I'm working on at the moment, it's so inspired by this. And I haven't read it for, yeah, it's like 40 years or something like that. And I didn't even realize it. And I remember rereading The Mists of Avalon at one point when after I'd written my fifth novel for adults, which was sort of based on Russian folklore. Mists of Avalon, Arthurian legend, this book, Russian folklore. But I just looked at it and went, oh my God, I feel like I've just copied. Well, it's not, right? But you just look at it and go, that is so inspired by this. So
Hmm.
actually, Mists of Avalon is our next reread. So looking
Oh,
forward to it.
amazing. Actually, I've not read that one. I'll put that on my list too. Yeah.
Yes, well, we're all a bit, what's the name? The author is a bit persona non grata now, but the book is great.
Ah,
So,
yes, yeah. Yeah. What was, because you've got not just the Gina Champion series, but you have so many novels
mm.
that deal with the spooky element, the supernatural element. What is your favorite supernatural element that you've explored in your novels and why?
Look, I wrote this book also out of print, and this is a great advertisement for all of my out of print books. But I wrote this book called Giants of the Frost it was the year after my son was born, so 2003. And it was all based around Norse mythology. This was before the Marvel series made all of those people different kind of star. And it was all based around Norse mythology, but also Norse folklore. And it was set on a remote weather station on an island off the coast of Norway, where the supply ship only came over once a week. So once you were there for a week at the least. And this was where I really, really, as I said, when I was pregnant actually with Luca, I just couldn't handle anything awful anymore. And
Mm.
so this is where I really started to lean into that atmosphere building. And, I just had this sort of feeling when I was writing the book of, in woodlands, and there would be things that would be in the woodlands, and they were all based on Norse myth. But in particular, I wanted to play with that idea of, how sometimes you kind of, you look around in your garden, you see a stick and you go, what's that stick? And then you look closer and it's a stick insect and you kind of go, ugh.
Yeah.
I wanted to get that feeling. And so I created a little creature, and it was based on the idea of a wood wight out of the Norse mythology or the Norse folklore, um, who was just looked like a little bundle of sticks outside her window. And so she's the window's going in the breeze or whatever. And so she reaches up to get it and she sees this kind of bundle of sticks. And then it just kind of stands up and starts kind of talking to her. Not in a cute way. Says, don't go in the lake, the draugr will get you. And she just like slams the window and goes back to bed because she's a chronic insomniac. So it's great. Everything she sees, she imagines she must have dreamt for a while. But that's, I think, my favorite, working with that kind of like a creature that's right on the border of being something out of nature and something out of supernature. That was probably my favorite one. And I've experimented with that a bit, with the idea of sort of like elemental spirits and what they might look like or feel like. And, the whole idea of magic users as being, in a way, people who can control those spirits. And rather than them being sort of neutral, them having their own will as well, and what could happen from that. So I guess they're the kind of things I like. The idea of those nature, supernature things.
That's very, very cool. And yeah, it's so interesting how terrifying that can be. When you were t talking about the little bundle of sticks and he starts talking, it made me think of this one time when I was younger. A friend and I were walking in the bush out the back of my nana's farm, and we were walking, and both of us just stopped. And I just remember saying, "Do you see that bowler hat?" And she said, "Yes, I see that bowler hat." And we ran for our lives. And it was like, it was a sunny day. It was beautiful. But we saw on a stump a bowler hat, like, oh, sorry, not a bowler hat, like a top hat,
Okay, yeah.
and just lost the plot. Like, it was like, that's not
I
supposed
love
to be
that.
there. And we don't know why it's there, but I don't
I
want to
love
find
it.
out. Go back later. It was just a very convincing pile of dead wood that looked like a
Yeah,
top hat. So it wasn't even a
yeah.
top hat, but
But it's
no.
that's something there that shouldn't be there, and I don't like it, and I didn't. Yes, yeah.
Yes, and there's
I
no
love
one
that.
else around. And the terror, I mean, I still think about it years and years later. The terror
Yeah,
was just unreal. And it's a bowler hat. It's
yeah.
very benign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, Freud's whole essay on the uncanny, which by the way is very readable and only, 6 or 7 pages long, is all about this, about why we find things like that uncanny. And that's what he uses the word, well, we've translated it into English as uncanny, unheimlich, because it's both familiar and unfamiliar and at the
Mm.
same time. And it really does have a fabulous impact on people if you can pull it off in a story.
Okay, I'll definitely I think feel like I'm gonna have a huge to read list after our chat today. Oh, fantastic. And so thinking about either a quote from one of your novels or a quote that is really a mantra that you live by or something that is tickling in your mind as you write, can you share with us a favorite quote or passage?
Absolutely. And in choosing this, I have actually chosen to give you a quote from someone else. My favorite poet, actually one of my favorite poets. I've got a lot of favorite poets. Um, I read poetry when I get up in the morning, if I remember to. It's much better than going on the news, which is awful. And one of my favorite poets is Mary Oliver, who I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of. And this is just the first 3 lines of her poem, Wild Geese. The whole poem is quite short, very much worth reading. But this is one that I've got pinned up in my office at home to remind me to live a good life. And it goes like this. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. I know, she's so great. I
I
love her so
love
much.
that. That is
Yeah,
so beautiful and so true. It doesn't have to
yeah,
be complicated. It just has to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Oh, that's
Mm.
beautiful. And I read somewhere that if we were to just read, like you say, a poem in the morning or a poem a day, it would be more useful to our souls, our hearts, our bodies than going to therapy. It's like
Oh, yeah,
rather
yeah, like,
rather than focusing on your own troubles, which tend to make them feel bigger, finding that human connection that often exists in poetry is so
yeah.
much more valuable.
I mean, don't get me started. So the other thing that my rereading book club, which is only 3 of us, do is we have a group chat on iMessage and we just send each other poems. And so it's wonderful. And one of us will always like, we're just a bunch of sappy middle-aged women. As one of us will send a poem and the others will go, oh my God, I've got shivers, blah, blah, blah. It's so wonderful. But yeah, I've got a collection of poetry next to my bed and I try to read that when I wake up in the morning. And I try to delay picking up my phone as long as I can.
Mm. Yeah, keep the world out just a little
Keep the
longer.
world out. The
Yeah.
world is too much with us, as Wordsworth said. I think it was Wordsworth,
Yes, and
I'm
he
sure.
said that before the iPhone. So,
That's right. He wouldn't have coped at all.
no. And so do
Or I
you
don't know, maybe the romantics would have been, like insufferable aura farmers on Instagram.
you can just imagine the aesthetic posts that they would do, like, oh, just
Oh
thinking
yeah,
hard.
Coleridge would be the worst. Shelley, can you imagine? Oh my God, they'd be
Oh,
the worst.
yeah, definitely. And I'm so glad Oscar Wilde never had social media. I
Yeah,
just feel like
same.
it would have been too much for us. Yeah,
Easier to expect them this way.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so do you have any projects coming up next, or where can we find you online so that we know what's coming, what's happening?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Instagram is the only social media I use. I'm a very bad author in that regard. I don't, but I do like Instagram. So I post very little except pictures of my cats.
That sounds perfect.
They're very good looking cats. So, um, for your readers, if they're interested in finding a book of mine that actually is in print, I've got a fantasy series that came out a couple of years ago. The first one, and that is called Daughters of the Storm. And that's all based on sort of Anglo-Saxon legends. And very proud of that. I like it a lot. And what I'm working on now is something set in 1883 in the Vale of Whitehorse that it's obviously pays an homage without realizing it to the owl service. There are no haunted dinner plates though, so it is quite different in that regard.
Yeah. It,
But yes, it features some crazy dreams and the wild hunt and all kinds of fun things like that. So
wonderful. I love, and that's what was so wonderful with the owl service is that as you're reading it, you never know if they're dreaming, if it's in their mind, if they're imagining it, if it actually happened. Like there's so much uncertainty,
yeah,
which
just
again,
that
very atmospheric.
yeah, that sort of laying over of legend and real life. Very, very,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
very
That's so
influential.
exciting. Well, thank you so, so much. This has been an absolute dream come true chatting with you today, Kim.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm very flattered. It was lovely to meet you, Jordan.
So lovely to meet you. And thank you all so much for joining our chat as well. If you liked what you heard, please take a minute to rate and follow this podcast, share it with like-minded friends, or put it in your group chat if you have a group chat. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I release new episodes once a month with no set date, so a subscription means you won't miss anything. However you wound up here, I hope you are well and living magically.